Hello, CardRunners. This is Ville, aka GoGetaRealJob, and I'd like to welcome you all to my series on micro PLO. This was an interesting challenge for myself, as well as for the past 3 years I've had very limited exposure to micro PLO. I had to obviously adjust my normal game quite a bit, so I figured it would be a good idea to make a small compilation on the theory and look at these different bullet points that I've gathered before we jump into the action to really take a deeper look at the adjustments that need to be made. All of these points are based on the assumption that we're dealing with an overwhelmingly loose passive player pool. Most pots will be multi-ways, and there will be lots of showdowns. Thus, for pre-flop play, we want to favor nutty hands, meaning hands that can make the nuts easily, such as high rundowns, big pairs, and suited aces. Good/premium combos of medium rank are also playable. This includes stuff like 10-9-8-7 or maybe 8-8-7-7 that are not so great for making the nuts, but they make it up through playability. And finally, we need to avoid low cards such as 6-5-4-3, for example. Hands like that, they really need to smash the flop to show profit, and obviously that's not going to happen often enough. And when we can't really rely on any fold equity post-flop, I think we should just completely eliminate those hands from our starting hand selection. As for 3-betting and 4-betting, 5-betting, 6-betting, whatever, you should definitely go for value mainly. You can't expect a ton of fold equity. And also 3-betting stuff like 8-7-6-5 double suited. I don't think those are half as valuable as maybe at higher stakes where you need to think about stuff like deception and board coverage and stuff like that. Stuff like that when you're constructing your 3-bit range. But since we're playing against players who are fairly oblivious to such concepts and generally don't pay a ton of attention to your overall game, I think 3-betting wide is definitely negative EV. For aggression, I advise favoring thin value bets over barreling airballs. This obviously comes from the fact that we can't rely on a ton of fold equity, but we can expect to get called by a much wider range than at higher stakes. We should definitely be value betting hands like top pair, top kicker a lot more often, as the range we're up against is a lot wider and there's a lot of value to be had making those bets. I think paying attention to the reduced fold equity is good when you're making c-betting decisions. I think you should avoid going overboard with your c-betting frequency, as delayed c-bets work just fine most of the time. Even though you miss a c-bet on some boards, that doesn't mean that you're gonna get run over by opponents who are gonna exploit this. That's definitely a consideration that you can pretty safely ignore at micro stakes. And finally, you definitely need to avoid repping hands such as a villain betting into you on the river when he completes a flush, but the board also pairs at the same time. I think trying to rep a full house against the likely flush from from your opponent is a losing play at these stakes. People generally don't understand the relative value of hands and are not really putting much effort into reading hands, so trying to sell them a story, so to speak, is generally a bad idea. As for sizing, and I think this goes for all 4 streets, you should ignore balance. You should simply manipulate pot size as needed, meaning for the top of your range you should size your bets as big, and the bottom of your range you can just make them slightly or even a lot smaller, since we're obviously trying to get paid